Hello, welcome to the Willie Bragg Show. I'm back. I was here earlier, a few hours ago. I had to go and get a little bit of rest, but I'm back. So I want to discuss Jordan Chariton, who made it on the previous episode of Due Dissidence this past Sunday, and it was one of those pot calling the kettle black moments that I just got out of this. And I don't exactly dislike Jordan Sheridan, but I'm not exactly the biggest fan of his. I mean, there are things I recognize that he's done that's valuable to the online left, but he's very sanctimonious and almost scripted. And not that I don't think he's sincere, but he just sounds very scripted and self-righteous and very sanctimonious when he talks, and just it's a little irritating. But anyway, he did make his appearance on Due Dissidence, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you that segment, and I'm going to give y'all my take on his dialogue with Keaton and Russell. So hold tight for a moment here. And I got it set on 1.25. If it's a little bit too slow, I'll fast forward the speed. So here we go.
For chat to Russ and I after the conclusion of this interview. I can't promise we'll have time for a talk back or anything, because our guest here was very kind to make time for us tonight. And so I do want to start, of course, by introducing the founder and host of Status Coup, Jordan Chariton. Jordan, thank you for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, kind sirs. Your mood music is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's one of the better tracks we have playing there.
Yeah, that's one of the highlights, I think, of the show is our countdown and our intro before we start talking.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah, it's like, a lot of Spielberg movies. It's like Saving Private Ryan, the D-Day sequence, and then nobody remembers the rest of the movie. It's like that. And it starts with 10 minutes of greatness, and then it's kind of downhill from there. So we were in touch late last year about an article that you wrote about infighting on the left, and you were on leave at the time. You had just had a baby. Congrats. I hope you enjoy your first Father's Day next week. I know that's a big day for new dads. I was a new dad myself 4 years ago. And so we kind of were briefly in touch and then out of touch. And then this last week, a clip surfaced of you on the Twitter machine that we were going to cover. And we thought, since we were in touch with you last year about topics that were kind of similar in nature, we would reach out to you again. So, Russell, do you want to take it away here? Get us started?
All right. So, thank you very much for joining us, Jordan.
Sure.
So, you wrote an article over the holidays that got a lot of attention, calling for an end to online left feuding. Just going to read a little bit of that. So you spent some time talking about and acknowledging disappointment with Bernie, disappointment with the squad, and expressing your own feelings about that and going around to different protests and actions and how exhausting it can be. So then you finished up here with take your break, feel your anger, disappointment, and exhaustion, check out for a while if that's what you need, and then rejoin the fight. Not a hollow fight against each other based on shallow, wasteful arguments about who is pure and who is fake, but against the plutocrats and their enablers who have turned the country into the United Corporations of America. Ultimately, as Anderson Silva once said, life is about how much you can take and keep fighting, how much you can suffer and keep moving forward. I am ready to keep fighting, hopefully together. That's a very nice sentiment. Do you feel that over the last several months, where you've been attacking channels that disagree with you politically as grifters, assuming ill will on their part for having a difference of opinion in exactly the way that you accuse people of in the article, do you feel that's in keeping with the spirit of those sentiments?
You'd have to be a little more specific. Who are you talking about? Jimmy Dore, others? I'm not sure what you mean.
Spoiler alert. Jordan Chariton goes into Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. He just goes and mentions Jimmy Dore over and over again. I just thought I mentioned that from the get-go.
Well, you mentioned Jimmy Dore, and you mentioned some mini-me channels, as you like to call them. I don't know if we're considered one of those. I don't know if RBN is considered one of those. Indie News is considered one of those.
I mean, if we're keeping it real, I think there's a lot of channels that it's just, with all due respect,
sure.
It's a lot of reactionary bullshit. I mean, and I even said in the piece, I'm guilty of it occasionally, not to the degree these channels are. But I started seeing this kind of in 2016 when Bernie dropped out. People were naturally upset, angry, and it's only kind of gotten significantly worse, where it's just kind of this never-ending, in my view, circle jerk of people doing live streams with all caps about the YouTubers they don't like and the tweeters they don't like, which you can look at my channel. I don't do that. I occasionally tweet if I have an opinion on someone, but I look at it based on what I cover on the ground, and I don't see these channels, particularly the big ones like Jimmy, who I'd be the first one to credit if he was using his massive audience to actually lift up the things that are happening. I mean, I can't tell you how many worker strikes I've covered, or union drives, or tenants unions, and et cetera, where it's not just that like I'm the only reporter there covering it, but none of the left channels are covering it. I mean,
okay, fair enough. Jordan Chariton is pretty good about being on the grounds, reporting on things like, with the Flint, Michigan water situation and things of that nature. And I will give him credit. And he was there when January 6th happened. A lot of the footages that you see on the mainstream news network, my understanding, comes from Status Coup, his film footage. He was out there when it happened. So I'll give credit where credit is due. But Jimmy Dore do offer solutions and things of that nature. And, a lot of people, whether we're talking about Sam Cedar or the Young Turks, they seem to disregard it. And it, as I said, it is kind of a circular firing squad, but it's not just Jimmy Dore that's doing this. Jordan Chariton is everybody, including yourself, and at least you do admit it. So, anyway,
I mean, none. Workers I've asked that are on strike or union organizing, have you reached out to this show? Yeah, haven't heard back. So to me, I get it. I mean, I think you would acknowledge like doing a show on, owning Crystal Ball, who interview, because you didn't like her interview with RFK. We'll get more.
Yeah, Jordan. Did you call out Nomiki Konst when she was insinuating that Crystal Ball was somehow right wing for calling out AOC on her not being involved with the Amazon union strike? Now, I know that you're going to be on the correct side on that issue, but Nomiki Konst was sitting there calling out Crystal Ball. Now, Crystal Ball is not perfect, but she rightfully called out AOC for not being involved. She decided to wear a Chick-fil-A dress at a gala ball rather than to go and hang out with and solidarity and work with union organizers with the American Amazon. Was it Amazon Labor Union? I'm sorry, Amazon Labor Union, to try to unionize Amazon, which the one in Staten Island was unionized. Any denouncing of Nomiki Konst? No, we're going to hear Jimmy Dore.
For clicks than covering the Amazon union drive. I mean, I think you'd be a little full of shit to say no. But if that's all we're going to do for the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, we're just going to be talking about the same stuff over and over and not accomplishing anything. So in my view, it's not really a matter of, I think there are just specific people that play for clicks. I mean, I don't really want to talk about Jimmy for an hour, but I knowing Jimmy, because I used to work with him and I used to be friends with him, how Jimmy talks now is not the Jimmy I knew 3-4 years ago. And people who know Jimmy will tell you that.
Well, Jimmy Dore might not be the same person from 3 or 4 years ago, but you're not the same person from 3 or 4 years ago. The people from Due Dissidence are not, and no human being's the same person they were 3 or 4 years ago. What are you getting with that? The common link is everybody's in one way or the other still on the online left, a prominent figure on the online left. You may not like the particular direction Jimmy Dore is going into, and do I agree with everything Jimmy Dore says all the time? Of course not. I don't agree with everything that every online left commentator other than myself, and I've even have evolved on a few little issues here and there over the years. So there is that. We all evolved. I know that was just a little bit of a cheap shot to want to say, well, he's turning into Steven Crowder or something like that. And that's not true. I mean, you may not like the direction he's going into, but you know what? Just listen to some of these people. I've heard Bosch basically criticizing the Young Turks, and I'm having to look at Bosch and saying, damn, you're getting me to defend the Young Turks over the Ukraine situation, because over the Nord Stream pipeline. Because, Bosch said, Bosch is sort of having a cavalier attitude about that Nord Stream pipeline, whereas at least the Young Turks are calling it out. And I don't particularly like the Young Turks these days, but at least they're calling it out that obviously it was the Ukraine and the United States, or the United States alone, or the Ukraine that went and did what they did to the Nord Stream pipeline.
I think he's gone on a formula. And I think there's a lot of other channels, frankly, that wouldn't dare criticize Jimmy Dore because they're catering or targeting, trying to get his audience. But to me, the broader issue, not to go on a monologue, is at the end of the day, I mean, when I first really, really got into politics, it was Occupy Wall Street. And being down there, it was revolutionary feel. Obviously, there were issues with it. But I can tell you, not everyone agreed on all things. And I think in the left, obviously, there's core principles. If you start hearing me talk about, we need access to healthcare, cancel me. But if there's too many channels that are so focused on this one's a sellout, this one's not pure, this and that. Meanwhile, Flint doesn't have fucking water 10 years later. I mean, people in Kalamazoo are being poisoned right now. I could go down the list of stories I cover. None of you cover that. I mean, that's just the truth. So to answer your question, Russell, because I guess you were trying to get at hypocrisy. Yeah, I definitely occasionally will say something if I still feel strongly, but it's just not to the degree that a lot of these channels spend all their time. I mean, the amount of time spent on Ryan Grimm and David Sirota and Crystal Ball. I mean, if you're going to say that's not for clicks, we just disagree.
It certainly is for clicks.
Have you ever hear Bosch talking about some of these people? You ever hear him? How he attacked Brianna Joy Gray and referred to her and as the rot of the online left, and he called her a scummy piece of shit and all that. That's what he called her and everything. And that's okay, but whether we're talking about Jimmy Dore or we're talking about Max Blumenthal or we're talking about whatever other channel on the online left that's not part of the boutique left worldview, that's it's okay when they do this shit, but this faction, shut the fuck up. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're telling us?
I would say that, yes, a large part of that is to get clicks and drive traffic to the site. Now, in our case, when we do that, we have a sort of unwritten rule on our part that we only do gossipy stories like that when there's a larger point to be made. When it brings up an issue, and Crystal Ball, your friend, has said this herself. She said you draw people in with the sugar and the fat, and then you give him the protein and the vegetables when they get there. In other words, if you can turn a gossipy headline into a substantive piece, not only can you do that, but I would argue, we interviewed Matt Taibbi a few months ago. He said, as a commentator, as a creator, you have a responsibility to sell your story. If you think it's important and think it's worth getting out there, then you have a responsibility to sell it. But in terms of channels that do use clickbait and intra-left feuding to drive traffic to their site, I'll give you a perfect example. You know these guys very well. The Vanguard, they refer to themselves very self-aware fashion as the TMZ Guard from time to time. You were on the Vanguard show, I think, a couple of weeks ago. The reason I found out you were on the Vanguard show a couple of weeks ago is because in preparation for this interview, I've been watching some of your live streams. And you said at one point during the live stream, I got to go soon because I got to be on the Vanguard in a few minutes. So I'm like, oh, Jordan must have been on the Vanguard. So I go to the Vanguard's channel. I'm looking for Jordan Chariton, and I don't see anything. I see nothing. Turns out you were on this episode featured here. The thumbnail and the picture, Vosh attacks the Young Turks, Illuminati, whoever the fuck that is, kicked out of the leftist mafia. No mention of Jordan Chariton. You were there talking about, I guess, some of your recent work, which, again, one of the things I told you in the DM, Jordan, and that nobody can take away from you no matter what they feel about you, is the quality of that on-the-ground work. So here you are, talking to the Vanguard guys, an hour and 20 minutes into the live stream. No mention of Jordan Chariton in the title. No mention of Jordan Chariton in the description.
I don't really get your point. I mean, they're pretty open. They're pretty open that they're just a drama channel, which I actually respect. I respect. And this was actually my issue for a long time with Fox News. I don't have a problem with a conservative channel, but just be honest about what you are. I don't have a problem with the Vanguard saying, yeah, we're a bunch of whatever Beavis and Buttheads in the Midwest and stirring up drama.
Yeah, okay. The Vanguard, they're a little bit better than, let's say, David Pakman or something like that these days. They're a little bit better than the Humanist Report or Majority Report or the Young Turks or Bosch. I gave you all that, but they have gotten kind of boutique left lately and gotten a little bit on the shit libby side and all that. When it comes to kind of ideologically beating up on Bosch or beating up Sam Cedar, ideologically beating up on whoever in the more mainstream side, great. They're great on issues like free speech and all that. I'm not going to take that away from them, and they have some great takes sometimes, but they have been on a path, and I have seen them going more mainstream in a way that's not I don't think is particularly healthy. That I've seen some of the other channels have gone in the past decade. Some of the bigger channels, and so because of that, I'm kind of critical of them. But they're not the worst channel around. I mean, and I know there's a rivalry between Due Dissidence and the Vanguard. And on that one, I'm obviously leaning more toward Due Dissidence, but at the same time, it's just this whole notion of that someone like the Vanguard, there's this double standard that the Vanguard's not, they're not guilty of this. They are. So anyway,
it's folks that try to pretend they're like somehow anti-establishment, delivering the news and this and that they're just doing fucking bullshit 24/7. I mean, the Vanguard doesn't pretend to be journalists, and I mean, I don't have a problem with that as long as you're being honest with what you're doing.
So you don't have a problem with the Vanguard taking 45 minutes of your time, and you're a new dad. I've been there. You don't have 45 minutes of spare time as a new dad. There's no such thing as spare time. You don't have a problem with them taking your interview piece that you gave to them, burying it underneath a headline and a thumbnail about Vosh, the Young Turks, and a literal cartoon shit lib. They would rather drum up clicks with gossip over cartoon libs getting fired from bullshit lib shows. You're telling me that you don't feel a need to call them out for gossip mongering, but you tend to want to call a lot of other channels out for doing the same thing.
I literally don't think it's the same thing, is my point. You're talking about a channel that explicitly says, we are a drama channel. We are here to talk shit, this and that. Would it have been nice to be in the headlines door?
So then why take your journalism to that channel? Why is that an appropriate form?
When you're being suppressed at every single pathway on YouTube, you pretty much go on whatever channel you have to get the stories out. I appreciate that they had me on, and I've been on their show before where I was in the headline, so it's not.
Yes, and you also do what you have to take to get people's attention, even if it means doing what you accuse the people that you don't like of what they're doing about stirring up drama or what have you. And they're not just these little mini-me channels that you're referring to. You don't know who the hell I am, Jordan, but count me among them as these little mini-me channels. Not when this is being done, there is a greater context to this because when we're basically analyzing what is wrong with our current left and what needs to be done to improve it. Now, when I go and criticize someone like David Pakman, now, I actually think that David Pakman's probably a nice person, but his takes are kind of cringe these days. I've said this before. On a tweet, I responded to David Pakman. He did a video where he was kind of agreeing that Tulsi Gabbard and Glenn Greenwald are some kind of Russian assets, and I basically said this is kind of why I stopped watching your show. And he responded to me, you stopped watching my show because of what the Ukrainians government has right about Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard. Well, you do you. It was something to that effect. Well, here's the thing about it. I wasn't even mad at him for saying that. I mean, that's his point of view, and he's wrong, but that is his point of view. I don't think he's a bad person. I just think he's he sort of displayed what's wrong with a lot of the online left, not just David Pakman, but someone like what we're talking about, Sam Cedar, or we're talking about the Young Turks, or we're talking about Rational National, we're talking about the Humanist Revolt, even lately with Kyle Kalinske, who's probably the least bad of them all. And I know I'm going to get among the fellow mini-me's that will probably be like, huh, whatever. Kyle Kalinske, I hate the fact he's gotten a little more mainstream lately, but he might be one of the better of the bigger channels that, in that regard. But he's even gotten a little bit more mainstream lately. And I'm not talking about supporting Marianne Williamson. He and Crystal Ball supporting Marianne Williamson for president. I'm talking about what they're going to finally ultimately do when Marianne Williamson drops out, and that is to get behind Biden all the way, instead of doing what is the right thing to do, which is to support Cornel West for president. Because really, you're voting for nothing if you vote for Biden. And a lot of these big channels are going to sit there and say, well, we got to go and vote for Biden, or if it's Kamala Harris, because let's face it, Biden is suffering from dementia, or whomever is the Democratic nominee that's not, and we know it's not going to be Marianne Williamson, and we know it's not going to be Robert Kennedy. And we know what will happen to Bernie Sanders if he decides to run again in 2024. And that's not going to happen. They're not going to let that happen. I had predicted that someone as mad as I am at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Party is so fucked up that they will give the Democratic nomination to Liz Cheney in the year 2024 before they give it to Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or even the snake, Elizabeth Warren. That's how far to the right and how beyond repair. I mean, how hopeless it is to work inside of the Democratic Party. And I get it. Your work inside the Democratic Party, Jordan. I get it. And I do wish you well in trying to reform the Democratic Party, but it just can't be reformed. But anyway,
it's not really like a big major deal to me that I wasn't. Listen, certain people are certain things. Not everyone's an on-the-ground journalist. Not everyone's a serious journalist. I don't have a problem if they're open about what they are. I think they're like wasting time trying to point out hypocrisy when, I mean, they are who they are. They're not. I've been on their. I've been on their show before. I was in the thumbnail. I was in the headline. I think what you're trying to explain, which I think is a little bullshit, to be honest with you. There's ways of, kind of giving the sugar to get people in and then giving them the broccoli. I think the channels you're kind of describing or in league with, I don't really know what you consider the broccoli, because I've watched a lot of these channels and they're doing clickbait, including Jimmy, by the way. And they're not covering substantive things. I'm sorry. Maybe you have a difference of opinion with me. I'll be honest. I've seen only a few clips of your show, so I'm not like knocking your show. Mm-hmm. I think I saw something about a story about the Indian boarding school or something that I thought was pretty substantive. So I'm not particularly like raining on your parade, but I think you're trying to like get me in a gotcha when I don't really give a shit if the Vanguard. I mean, the Vanguard says what they are. You have other channels that are pretending that they're the real leftists and everyone else is a fraud and a sellout and this, that, and the other thing. And
everybody's a leftist in their own way. Everybody is a leftist in their own way. And I'm not even going to say that they're insincere about their leftism. It's just that there's a lot of people who are misguided. Now, granted, there are a lot of egos involved. And there is this my way is the correct way attitude. That exists on all sides, every side, including your corner, Jordan, including your corner.
And it basically, like, Jesus Christ, I was on the road to, what was it, a year ago? Every one of you were covering TYT versus Jimmy Dore for 4 fucking months. It was embarrassing.
I remember that with the whole thing with Aaron Maté, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kalinske, Young Turks, all fighting during the summer of 2021. I remember that. And you know what? The Young Turks were involved fighting back. They were the ones that started this shit. I mean, it started with Anna Kasparian and Shank Uger talking shit about Aaron Maté, and then it led up all the way to her messaging Jimmy Dore blackmailing, and that's how you can only interpret it was a blackmail. I mean, yeah. And a lot of people say, well, it's not a blackmail. And she basically said she's going to go and air out his dirty laundry about what some people have debated was an episode of sexual harassment or not. And so, and so that got brought out into the open, and several other online lefties got brought into this fight and everything. It lasted for several months. And yeah, some of these smaller channels and some of these people did kind of bring it on, kept it going on and on and on. But a lot of the Young Turks people did it too. They were guilty of it themselves. In fact, they started it, Jordan. And you ought to realize, you ought to be, you of all people. Remember, you got fired by Shank Uger. You got fired by the Young Turks. Remember that. I never hear, I hear you sometimes when talking about the Young Turks. I hear the resentment underneath your voice sometimes. I mean, I would be too. For what they did to you. But anyway.
Embarrassing. And it was for clicks. Did Aaron Maté in the beginning have a point, and was he smeared? Absolutely. But if you're going to sit here and try to get me that I go on the Vanguard, who apparently you don't like, listen, as long as you're honest about what you are, I say watch whatever you want. To me, they're pretty open that they're not like a serious channel. They're not serious journalists. I think popcorn and entertainment from time to time is fine. So I don't really have a major issue with their show.
Jimmy Dore refers to himself constantly as a pothead comedian in his garage. So he doesn't exactly present himself as doing what you do either, does he?
I'll answer you. I just don't get, why do you want to spend all our time talking about Jimmy Dore? I don't get it. But to me,
you brought him up first, my friend.
I did not bring him up. You brought up a tweet.
Jordan, you like to bring up Jimmy Dore. Sam Cedar likes to bring up Jimmy Dore. David Packman likes to bring up Jimmy Dore. All of y'all like to bring up Jimmy Dore from time to time. Young Turks likes to bring up Jimmy Dore. It's all y'all like to ever fucking do is Jimmy Dore this and Jimmy Dore that. This is all y'all ever do. I mean, you take Jimmy Dore's words and you take it out of context and make him out like he's some kind of right winger or whatever. Now, there are times that he has said things that are a little bit conciliatory, and I understand about reaching out, working like for example, people getting on his case about Rage Against the War Machine. Well, anybody who supports this war situation in the Ukraine are fucking wrong if they're backing the U.S. and NATO. I'm not saying you have to sit there and support Putin. I don't support Putin. I don't support Russia. But I also don't support the U.S. and NATO. Of course, that position by many people in your corner makes me a Putin apologist. Because I've seen them do this to Glenn Greenwald. I've seen them to do this to Tulsi Gabbard. And they've done this to the Gray Zone. They do this to Jimmy Dore. They do this to a lot of folks on the online left. Well, they must be a Russian apologist. They must be a Putin apologist. And that's all I ever hear from these people. They just sit there and malign them and call them Russian, especially people like Bosch, for example.
It just seems like this is very inconsistent with the spirit of the article that you wrote. You have people who have chosen to really capitalize on this very niche left channel infighting, and yet you don't call them out. You seem to call out only people who you disagree with politically, who are not in your lane politically.
But who are the people I'm not calling out? Because you think the Vanguard, I should call them out because they...
I have no idea why you would write an article like that and then go on a channel that is built around online gossip, where there's nothing there other than online gossip.
I told you why. most of your channels don't cover the stories I cover and don't invite me on. It's been a real.
That's not true either. You had a lengthy.
That is true. I've been doing this for 7 years. Wait a minute. It's pulling teeth to get most of the online left to cover the stories I cover, let alone retweet me. So, I mean, I can tell you that is my experience trying to get. I mean, people give Breaking Points, for example, a lot of shit. That they cover the stories I cover. They have me on to cover them. They probably cover Amazon Labor Union organizing more than any channel other than I. So my point is, I'm not going to turn down when I don't have a lot of distribution, and YouTube algorithmically literally suppresses most of the on-the-ground reporting I do. I mean, I'm not.
Oh, I agree that YouTube basically fucks with your channel all the time. They fuck with a lot of online lefty channels, and you have a large enough following subscription-wise that for some reason they do kind of shadow ban you. And I do think that they do signal you out, Jordan. This is more the reason why you should not be battling the way. If you want to call it the Jimmy Dore faction of the online left, if you want to call it that, we can call it that. It's one more reason why you shouldn't be doing that. You should maybe even just go ahead and join. Yeah, as I said, that doesn't mean that you give up what you're doing, your path, or that you're on, or what have you. But just don't be so confrontational to those that are independent of the two-party system and write them off as right-wing. The two-party system is right-wing in itself. Yeah, one is less right-wing than the other. And that's what it's really, that's really what it's all about. This is why we have this online left bickering going on. It all goes around. It all centers around the Democratic Party, and whether we should all work inside the Democratic Party, work outside the Democratic Party, or whether we should have an inside-outside strategy. That's really what it's all about. And everybody has this my way or the highway attitude. Yeah, do you have those that have this? Well, we got to work inside the Democratic Party. If you don't, and you dare even mention third party, even on a limited basis, well, you're just allowing the Republicans to win elections. Or, and then if you're an independent, and you want to support, let's say last fall, a John Fetterman for U.S. Senate or something like that. They're just sheep herding you right back into the Democratic Party. Now, my position, I've always, until recently, I was kind of like an inside-outside person. I am totally independent of the two-party system now. I will never vote for another Democrat again. I will not vilify those that will vote for the Democrats as long as they don't vilify me. But at the same time, I do think objectively it is a waste of time, considering how the Clintonistas are still in fucking control of the Democratic Party and how the Bernie movement. Now, I don't think that the Bernie was trying to intentionally sheep herd this energy back into the Democratic Party. I think he was trying to change for the better, but he hit a brick wall. I'm not into, I was once a Bernie bro, but screw Bernie now. I'm not into that, but I am disappointed with Bernie, being friends with Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not my good friend. He will never be my good friend. So, and in that regard, I will agree with those on the Jimmy Dore left in that regard. But with the TYT left, that and then Sam Cedar left that wants to work inside the Democratic Party, they may be pissed off with the Clintonistas, but at the end of the day, they're like, well, Republican bad, Democrats, I guess, not so bad attitude. What it does, it actually pushes the country further right by playing the two-party politics. The Republicans are always the ones drawing the line in the sand, and the country gets further and further right. That's the way I see it.
Not going to turn down the opportunity to talk about the stories. If I thought like the Vanguard dudes were bad dudes or were doing like unethical things, yeah, I wouldn't go on. But like, I don't see that. I think they're just open and honest about what they are. I think what I was trying to get at is I think the preponderance of the channels, which is a lot more than the Vanguard, we're basically ending up in a circle jerk on a long death march to nowhere. based on a game of Survivor of who is the real last pure leftist. That's what I think Jimmy honestly started 2 years ago when he dramatically shifted by basically going on a holy crusade against anyone that dares disagree or has a different strategy than him. And I think a lot of other channels, intentionally or not, kind of picked that up. But to answer you, I mean, I just personally, to me, and I've been consistent, I've said this about Fox for years, if somebody is open and honest about what they are, whether it's conservative, liberal, we're schmucks, we're a drama channel, I respect that because you're not trying to fool anyone. My issue is with channels that are trying to present themselves as news and I'm anti-establishment and we're the real leftists, and they're just doing clickbait. So,
Okay, Jordan, I'm going to give you a little bit of credit. You were on the correct side of Force to Vote. You were one of the bigger channels that were on the correct side of Force to Vote. Along with some of the, with Kyle and Crystal, with Brianna Joy Gray. They were all on the correct side of it. The Young Turks and the Vosh of the world, the Nomiki Kants, all of these folks. Sam Cedar was initially on board with Force to Vote until he decided, he hated Jimmy Dore more than enacting universal health care. That maybe some phone calls were made or what have you. And I don't know what the hell happened, but took a good idea like Force to Vote and basically just it seemed like everybody did this just to spite Jimmy Dore. That's what it kind of looked like to me. It was just kind of like they didn't want to give Jimmy Dore credit for what was a good idea. It's not even a Jimmy Dore idea. I mean, of course, y'all know that. It was not a Jimmy Dore idea. It was an idea proposed by Democratic Socialists of America in 2019 about basically pressuring mainstream Democrats into to enacting progressive legislation, such as Medicare for all. We had a pandemic, and the pandemic proved in itself that employer-based coverage was also a farce, along with the criminality of our medical industrial complex that's for generations have actually bankrupt working families and actually in some cases killed people on the basis that the profit motive kills people on the basis that they can't afford access to healthcare because it is so fucking expensive in this country. A problem that other countries really do not have to contend with. Even many third world countries do not have to contend with. So he came up with this idea. It was a perfect scenario that the Democrats had a reduced a minority in Congress. You took that advantage because the Republicans will not vote for Nancy Pelosi. You know that they should pressure Nancy Pelosi and say, "Look, Karen, you're going to go and allow a House vote on Medicare for all, or you're not going to be Speaker." And they rather protect Nancy Pelosi than have Medicare for all. That was, and they rather do that and by slapping Jimmy Dore in the face over this shit. I don't blame Jimmy Dore for being pissed off about this. On this one, I am on team Jimmy 100%.
He calls himself a pothead comedian all the time. He does crank calls with the guy playing Al Pacino. We call ourselves a couple of shit-talking Jew boys from New York all the time. I mean, I don't know, what is this thing?
I don't really get, that's not my issue with Jimmy. I've never said that's my issue with Jimmy, that he presents himself as
no, but your issue with this community is that we don't cover enough substantive issues, right? That's your issue.
Yes, and mostly just create outrage porn and reactionary bullshit. Yes. So presenting you said it yourself. That it's for clicks, yes. So you could try to rationalize it that, we do that so that I'm not saying you, others do that.
I said me.
I honestly haven't watched it. But you could say, well, they do that just to get people in, then they could cover the real things. I mean, that's just not true. I can tell you, I've been on the ground for years. This is not out of arrogance. It's just the facts. Mm-hmm. It is very rare that besides no one else on the ground, it's very rare that other people are covering this. I don't expect, this is technically an online democracy. People don't have to cover all the same things. I'm not saying you have to cover what I'm covering 24/7. My issue with Jimmy has nothing to do with how he presents himself, whether it be a journalist or a pothead comedian. I think he's clearly made a pivot to pander to the right, and certain
All
online
right. So there you
demographic.
go. All right.
That's what I think.
All right.
It's not that
Okay.
he presents himself as something else. I mean, any objective person can see that.
Well, what about pivoting to the right by saying that Joe Biden is a good guy in 2016 at the end of the day, or Hillary Clinton was the one in 2016? I mean, of course, after Bernie was defeated twice. If that's not pivoting to the right, because let's face it, Joe Biden proved to be a neocon, and Hillary Clinton is a neocon. I mean, how no hell anybody could vote for Hillary Clinton, who turned Libya into who basically turned Libya into a slave state again. It took the most successful socialist economy on the African continent, the most prosperous nation, and destroyed it. And turn it into a place where there's slavery has returned. This is the legacy of Hillary Clinton. I'm glad that Hillary Clinton. I'm glad I voted against Hillary Clinton. I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but I'm sure as hell glad I did not feel dirty by voting for Hillary Clinton. That vote for Jill Stein would be repeated 100 times over, again and again and again. So in 2016,
that Jimmy Dore is not talking the same way Jimmy Dore talked 2 or 3 years ago. If you want to say, well, things have changed, that's fine. But
how's Jimmy Dore? Jimmy Dore. Okay, people evolve, but where has Jimmy Dore changed? I mean, when he was on the Young Turks, he was the hot-headed, angry leftist on the set. When I saw those panels, I mean, he was the one that was interesting. He was the one that, not that the others were terrible at the time. It was a different Young Turks. The Young Turks was different back then. Now they have evolved. It was a better Young Turks in those years. I can't really watch the Young Turks today. It's gotten that terrible. I mean, they can come out with a good story occasionally, and I do appreciate the fact that they owned Dennis Prager almost a year ago. Well, it was like maybe about 8 or 9 months ago, where they had a debate with him. He was a guest on their show. But then you go around and say, well, Jimmy Dore's right wing because he goes on he went on Tucker Carlson, or Glenn Greenwald went on Tucker Carlson when Tucker Carlson was working for Fox News. But at the same time, is it okay for Anna Kasparian to be a guest on the Daily Wire and to be buddy with squeaky little Ben Shapiro, who I think is ideologically worse than Tucker Carlson? At least Tucker Carlson is anti-war. Ben Shapiro is all, Ben Shapiro, the one who's incapable of getting his wife wet. Remember the song by Cardi B, WAP? Yeah, he said he did not. He's apparently incapable of getting his wife wet. Yeah, that's true. But anyway, he's all for the war in the Ukraine. At least Tucker Carlson is on the correct side of that question. But apparently Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore are right wing for going on Tucker Carlson. But it's okay for Anna Kasparian to hang out with Ben Shapiro. I know that they were debating and they had differences of opinion, but I just don't get it. One could go to a show and it's okay. The other one can't. I see a lot of inconsistency there.
Well, I think things have changed here. Let's get into this. All right, it took a while for us to get to that, right? Because you did say you don't have a problem with the show.
You're the one that brought up Vinny, to be clear. So
you said his name first. I said, what was the question that Russell asked? What was the question?
You brought up the tweet, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, I didn't bring up the tweet yet. I'm going to bring up the tweet now. All right. So these are the issues, right? So this is sort of a framework, right, for how and where these sort of fault lines lie. By the way, Russell, I don't know if your StreamYard is fucking up, but the chat is frozen on my end. I'm not seeing any new chats. The chats are going in YouTube. I can't see them. So we're gonna have to.
I have the chat shut off.
Oh well, open it up. I don't know what's going on. Anyway,
the last one I see is Durga.
Yeah, see, that's been a while. Something's wrong. Anyway, don't worry about that. We'll figure that out afterwards. All right, so here is sort of the tweet that had some eyes on it, right? Jimmy Dore responding to, I think, Michael Tracy put out a tweet about the Trump indictment and things like that. And you put out a checklist of issues. And these, I think, kind of represent where a lot of these differences lie, right? In the sort of post-Bernie fractured left space, right? So obviously I told you, the one I'm sort of most interested in talking about is the second one down, where you sort of accuse many of us of cheerleading the provoked, which you put in quote marks, which I think is interesting, Putin's Ukraine invasion.
That's actually not true, but go on. I didn't accuse many of us. I've heard Jimmy basically say Putin's not a bad guy.
Okay, well, this sort of, I think, illustrates, I think a lot of those points. So do you want to pick one of these issues and point out where you think these sort of disagreements lie? Hash out any one of them. Go ahead. You can take your pick.
I mean,
take your pick.
I would like, to me, the left that I joined, I mean, can you imagine if a black person was caught on tape a week before they shot up people at a White Lives Matter protest saying, I wish I had my AR-15, I'd shoot up all these people, then walked around at a MAGA rally and with an AR-15 style weapon, lied that he was a medic, was waving around his gun at people, and then killed 2 people and injured 1. Can you imagine what would happen to a black person that did that? I mean, there's no, I don't know many, I don't say real leftists, but I don't know many people that looked at the Kyle Rittenhouse situation and thought, other than Wisconsin's fucked up laws, that was self-defense, that you could basically be a vigilante. And, it was classic self-defense. So that's one. I think that was a clear case of an unhinged teenager who had a God complex or a vigilante complex that created the danger he says he felt threatened by.
Kyle Rittenhouse was a dumbass to allow himself in the situation he allowed himself to be in. And any defense that Jimmy Dore has, and I've seen some of it, and I'm not going to say that I'm not going to write Jimmy Dore off over that. I mean, I think there's more to it than how Chariton is painting it. I mean, I see what he's saying, but I don't exactly. That's not enough to write off Jimmy Dore as some kind of right winger, even though I may not particularly be fond of Kyle Rittenhouse myself.
The point I was trying to make about Ukraine, I mean, I've been consistent. I don't know if you've seen, I've said for about a year, I think we should stop sending weapons to Ukraine. I've also said it's actually nuanced. Obviously, the Soviet Empire was lied to at the fall, when they ended. They were promised that NATO would not go east of reunified Germany. Obviously, they were lied to. And clearly, they have threats, right on their border. So to me, I'm not I hear people saying the NATO left, whatever that means. I'm not a stand for NATO. And I think Russia has real threats. But where I draw the line, if you're anti-war, you should strongly condemn. I mean, I'll tell you what Cornel West says. I think we all agree. We like Cornel West. Cornel West said, an invasion is a crime against humanity. It's Putin's imperial response to the U.S. imperial use of NATO as an instrument of U.S. global power. So I condemn Putin invading Ukraine, whether or not Russia had legitimate threats or grievances. I think the reason that he gave and the reason people like Jimmy gave is absolute bullshit. Putin at the beginning said it's to denazify Ukraine, which is a joke.
How is it a joke when there are actual Nazis in the Ukraine? In 2014, when the CIA took over the Ukraine, and when they assisted in the toppling of the Ukraine government and put in the present government they had, that the Azov battalion were legitimized under this. They were legitimized. And they talked about the neo-Nazi element of the Azov battalion back then, and they were mentioning this all the way until the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, and then until recently, for the past year and a half, they've been blocking this shit until what was it? The New York Times reluctantly started admitting, I guess there's a Nazi problem. Come on now, I mean, come on now. There was a Nazi problem. And never forget, there is a kill list. There's a kill list that I know you don't care for Jimmy Dore these days, but should it matter to you that there are Americans like Jimmy Dore that's on the kill list, or people, or various Americans that are now on this kill list? Does that mean anything to you that Americans lives are threatened by a paramilitary organization in the Ukraine that the government tolerates in that over there.
His speech, which I watched at the invasion, was very nationalistic and bringing back the golden days of the Soviet Empire, the Soviet Union. So I probably think we agree on more than we disagree on Ukraine. I don't think we should be involved in Ukraine. But I'm also have a problem with people that claim they're anti-war that just like lick Putin's balls, which is what's going on. Which
there's no licking of Putin's balls. There is no. I have said this many times. If I lived in Russia, I would not vote for Vladimir Putin. I would not. He would not be my first choice. Do I think that Vladimir Putin is the most evil man in the world? Hardly. As well. I mean, Saudi Arabia scares the shit out of me a hell of a lot more than Russia, you know. But the United States has a tendency to be friends with over 70% of the world's dictatorships around the world, including the Ukraine, because Ukraine is not a democracy. It is not a liberal democracy. The Ukraine bans their political opposition. A confident democracy does not ban political opposition. Okay.
With Jimmy and certain others, I mean, I think certain things are nuanced that you don't need to be on like Team Russia or Team Ukraine or whatever. And I think there's broader things.
Have you heard Jimmy say that? I mean, because
I heard him say the people that not the bad guy. Yeah.
Not the bad guy in this enemy. Right. In this situation, right? But most of the people that I see comments on that
disagree.
Well, but you're saying we promised Russia that we wouldn't move east. And then the
bottom line is you either think it's okay that he invaded Ukraine or you don't. I don't think it's okay. Even
I'm not exactly happy that Russia invaded the Ukraine, but I'm not exactly happy that the United States and the West broke their promise and said that we're not going to expand NATO to the east. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did. And I'm not happy that corporate gangsters from predominantly America and other Western countries went and looted the economy of Russia and fucked them during the 1990s. If you want to know why there is a Vladimir Putin as their leader today, a lot of it has to do with that. And if I am going to be sympathetic toward Russia, I can almost look at Russia today the same way I look at the Soviet Union in hindsight toward Afghanistan with regard to the Ukraine. Because remember what happened, and the United States were indirectly supporting some terrible people. The Taliban eventually took over Afghanistan, and the Al-Qaeda caused a problem down the road. So I'm going to go make that comparison today. You look at the Ukraine, look at the neo-Nazis in the Ukraine, the Assad Battalion, and you know, look what can happen. The United States giving in the West, the NATO countries giving all these weapons and aid and indirectly giving it to Nazis over there. We could have a neo-Nazi problem in the 21st century, a terrorism problem with neo-Nazis because of it, in the same way we had a problem with Al-Qaeda over the past 20 years. So you think about that. Let that be food for thought for a moment. I think that's a very scary scenario. We need to stop this shit right now.
And with the
I don't think that is the bottom line. I don't think that is the bottom line.
To me, it is. There's a lot of people dying. If you're anti-war, that should be a very important fact.
Of course. Look,
I told you before the interview, I don't really cover foreign policy 24/7. So
I know you don't.
It's not my strongest point, but at the end of the day, to me, if you're anti-war, you could say no. I mean, literally, so Russia has serious, credible grievances. The United States, frankly, I do think could have done more in terms of negotiations, but didn't want to in the beginning. But to me, to then like almost compartmentalize that, well, no, you know, he had no choice, he had to. I just don't agree with that. And when I hear people saying Putin, who by the way is like killed gay people, killed journalists, like he's not a
yes. And again, it's one of the problems. Let me scroll that back a second. Okay, hold on a second.
I told you before the interview, I don't really cover foreign policy 24/7. So
I know you don't.
It's not my strongest point, but at the end of the day, to me, if you're anti-war, you could say no. I mean, literally, Russia has serious, credible grievances. The United States, frankly, I do think could have done more in terms of negotiations, but didn't want to in the beginning. But to me, to then like almost compartmentalize that, well, no, he had no choice. He had to. I just don't agree with that. And when I hear people saying Putin, who, by the way, is like killed gay people, killed journalists, like he's not a good guy. He's not.
Okay, we agree on that last part. But you know what? The treatment against the LGBTQ people in the Ukraine is far worse than it is in Russia. That's the dirty little secret people don't realize. That's the dirty, and I covered this about a month before Russia invaded Ukraine, where they have been actually marginalized in the Ukraine. There is an anti-LGBTQ crisis in the Ukraine that's not talked about. Another thing about killing journalists or whatever, remember, Ukraine has a kill list. There's like several hundred people on this kill list. There are several American politicians and journalists on this kill list. European politicians, people from around the world, entertainers, journalists, politicians, they're on the kill list. Roger Waters from Pink Floyd might be the most well-known people on the kill list. Henry Kissinger, who I'm not particularly fond of, but nobody should be on a kill list, okay? Nobody should be on a kill list.
It's not the, he's not the bad guy.
I don't see a lot of people say that he is, though. I mean, this is where it gets into straw manning. Who have you seen say Putin is a good guy? I see a lot of people say Putin is an authoritarian dictator.
I've literally heard Jimmy say Putin's not the bad guy here.
Okay. Russia is not a dictatorship. Russia is a democracy. Is not the best example of a democracy, but it's not a dictatorship. They have a parliamentary system, and Vladimir Putin is elected by the people of the Ukraine, by the people of Russia. That is saying that does not make me an endorser of the Russian way of doing things. Now, I endorse the Russian way of doing healthcare over the American way of doing healthcare, because they managed to say, hey, healthcare is a right for the Russian people. The United States has a lot of accounting for on that question. Of course, Jordan, I'm sure you'll agree with that.
The bad guy is
not
not
the same as not a bad guy.
Right, and it's not to say he's the
right,
good guy. He's not the enemy.
My point is, I don't agree with
that.
I think when you're invading a country, starting a war, I mean, we just don't agree. You can think they have legitimate grievances, but we just don't agree with the action of starting a war.
But we don't agree is different from putting this. I mean, you put this word "provoked" in quote marks as if they weren't actually provoked. And I'm sorry, they were 100% provoked.
Yes, Russia was provoked. It's been provoked for many years by the West, and they are drawing the line in the sand over to Ukraine. It is a big threat to have Ukraine as a member of NATO, and I mean, it's just insanity that we have people in this country who are one time anti-war or wanting to go and fuck with a country with nuclear weapons. We're talking about the shit libs, but I'm not giving the conservative Republicans any praises either, because they want to do the same thing with China over Taiwan. Again, country also with nuclear weapons. And if you fuck with one, the other's going to have its back. You fuck with Russia, China's going to have Russia's back. You fuck with China, Russia's going to have China's back. It is a recipe for disaster. Scary times we live in, folks. Scary time we live in, Jordan.
Right? 100%.
Right, but there's a difference between them having legitimate threats and issues and making the decision to invade Ukraine. You would agree with that, correct?
Sure, I would. Yes. But let's flip it around. If a hostile military alliance were creeping up through South America, and then Mexico decided, with the help of a hostile power overseas, hey, maybe you should join, how would we react? There'd be no fucking Mexico. We all know that, right? So the world is run by thugs and gangsters. You don't agree with that? You don't think
I would not agree with invading Mexico and killing innocent Mexicans because of that.
Neither would I, which is why I said, of course, the Ukrainian people should not have to pay for the crimes and betrayals of the U.S.
Do you really think, you're being honest here, do you really think people like Jimmy, Max Blumenthal's coverage has been balanced and not decidedly like almost parroting Russian talking points? You really think that?
Compared to the mainstream media, yes.
I don't think that they are consciously parroting Russian talking points to make Vladimir Putin look like a good guy. No, I do not believe
that's
that.
total bullshit.
This sounds like 2003 Iraq War, you calling people Saddam apologists for opposing the Iraq War. That's how a lot of this sounds. And you, by your own admission, you have just said.
I'm telling you, I think you're genuinely either not paying attention to what these people say, or, you know,
I don't think it's
because
operating.
they literally speak from the Russian point of view and basically saying Ukrainians are killing themselves and
you agree
on Zelensky and all that.
You agree that the U.S. and NATO did provoke Russia?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're parodying a Russian talking point right now.
Good point.
Because Russia
Right,
was
but I don't go out and praise
some of
Putin.
the things you believe
But who gives a
overlap
fuck about?
with them.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Who gives a fuck about praising Putin? Who gives a shit about that? The bottom line is, should we be funding and arming Nazis, which we are? The New York Times just put out an article saying, "Hey, the Ukrainian."
I find that really interesting that you say that.
Listen, Jordan.
Look, I'm of
have
the
not come
position
up
that they are
please.
Tibetan mystics, so I just want to go on the record.
I think it's so funny, not you, but in general. All this, and by the way, 100% funding Nazis. It's very interesting. All these channels, that's the main thing they focus on, but they never cover in America the rise of domestic neo-Nazis in America.
I cover a lot of right-wing shit that goes on in this country, whether we're talking about vanilla fascists like Ron DeSantis, or when it really happens in its ugliest form, whether it's some neo-Nazi sect that's doing something evil and everything, it'll get covered. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Whether we're talking about some knuckleheads in Courtis Lane, Idaho, or whether we're talking about some alt-right asshole like Marjorie Taylor Greene in the U.S. House of Representatives. I do cover right-wing politics when it happens here in the United States, which we have too much of to begin with.
Not just Jimmy, none of these channels. It's a lot of focus on Nazis in Ukraine, which I agree. We should not, I've said for a year, we shouldn't be funding Nazis in Ukraine, but there doesn't really seem to be a consistency. They don't seem to care about the clear rise in white supremacy, neo-Nazism, which I have seen on the ground all over this country at rallies, at protests, militiamen. There's never any focus on the rise of Nazis in America, which I find very interesting for people that care so much about Nazism in Ukraine. But
there is. Like, for example, at a lot of these pride marches, you have a lot of these neo-Nazis out there counter protesting, and you have right now. I mean, and some of them are in its vanilla form called the Proud Boys, and some of them are, what's it called, the Patriot Front. And you have various other groups out there, the National Socialist movements. This shit gets covered, Jordan. It gets covered. I don't know what you're getting at, and what are you trying to say? You're trying to say that there's some kind of red-brown alliance going on with Jimmy Dore and these little mini-me channels. Man, no, fuck off of that shit. Really, knock it off. I have no time for neo-Nazis. I have no time for fucking racists. I have no time for the Klan. And listen, the show you're on, you're kind of indirectly lumping Due Dissidence with the other leftists that you're accusing them of. I mean, RBN. I mean, you're lumping RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. About 5 working class African Americans. You're lumping them in as part of this Red Brown Alliance. Due Dissidence. You're lumping these 2 Jewish gentlemen here with a Red Brown Alliance of sorts. I mean, that's what you're doing. That's just wrong and awful. In no way, shape, or form do I support anything resembling any kind of Red Brown Alliance. Come off of it.
To answer your question, you said, who cares about Putin?
Listen,
I do. I don't like leftists who call themselves anti-war, basically ghosting or shadowing that Putin invaded this country. There's, I don't have the exact number, but I would assume at this point, hundreds of thousands of people that have died, to basically, because we're also anti-establishment and anti-military industrial complex and anti-America, to kind of not focus on that Putin invaded this country in my view, the reasons he gave are phony to denazify Ukraine and these things. I don't think.
Okay. Now, do I have this love? Now, I don't wish the United States harm, but I'm not exactly lovey-dovey toward America. But I don't wish it any harm and all that. But a spade is a spade. The military-industrial complex has so much toxic control over the political discourse in Washington, D.C. They're making money off of this shit, Jordan, and you fucking know it. And the Washington, D.C. consensus, the shitlibs and the neocons who are controlling the foreign policy in this country, you fucking know that they're making money, making these speeches and these foundations and these forums and all that by keeping some of this neocon wars going. And of course, they're going to have all the health care they want. They're going to have they're going to be able to go to the Hamptons, and they're going to always be able to go to wherever they need to go and never have any problems, while the rest of us suffer, while Americans, working class, suffer in this country.
I don't think that's a small thing. We just disagree on that. But I agree with you on the core things. I don't think we should be funding Ukraine. I mean, I pushed back Marianne Williamson in our interview. I agree with her policy.
Jordan, when I sent you a DM, I told you we weren't going to ambush you. I cut you off, but you cut me off a few times here when I'm trying to make these points. Number one, with regard to your point about the creeping neo-Nazi threat here inside our own borders, I think
it's not creeping. I mean, it's here. Go ahead.
Well, I would say that the real fascist threat in this country now is the merging of corporate power with security interests with, yes, I'm sorry, the Democratic Party. Stacey Plaskett sent Matt Taibbi an email threatening with 5 years of prison time based on a segment she saw on the fucking Mehdi Hassan show. You tell me that's not the fascist threat? These people have power. Okay, these people. And
there is a point about that. I do believe there are actual, neo-Nazis, Klan Nazis, Proud Boys, Patriot Front, all those fuckers doing what they're doing. But then there is another type of fascism out there. It's not inherently, necessarily racist or what have you, but it's certainly authoritarian. And remember, the Gestapo during the Third Reich, remember, it was created during the Weimar Republic. It was created by essentially people. It was created by the Social Democrats. Doesn't mean that the Social Democrats in Germany were Nazi supporters. Far from it. They were one of the first people that Hitler dealt with. But they used that institution to go and they used that to go after others. Now, that was why it was insane when Biden created his disinformation governance board. I don't know where you stood on that when that became an issue last year, but I didn't hear you talk about it. And if you did talk about it, hey, I stand corrected. But I did not hear you talk about it so far as I know. And where were you on that issue? Again, if you mention it, I stand corrected. So liberalism and mainstream conservatism can come up with some horrific ideas that and set up institutions that an authoritarian force later on could co-opt for themselves.
These people have power. These aren't some Nazi diddlers in the backwoods of Oregon, organizing somewhere. That's what I consider the fascist threat here at home. Now, with regard to the Nazis in Ukraine, the New York Times just put out a piece last week saying, hey, you know what? Maybe these Ukrainian fighting forces should hide those Nazi logos on their uniform because it's reinforcing what you just said, Russian propaganda, that there are Nazis, a significant number of Nazis fighting in the Ukrainian army. So yes, there are Nazis in Ukraine. And to me, agitating World War III by funding Nazis in Ukraine, that is what I would call a red line. So if a candidate like Marianne Williamson, who you just said you push back on a bit, and I saw the interview, I think you did, maybe not as much as I would have, but that's fine. We're two different people. Fair enough, right? That is not a red line for you. Why is her stance on Ukraine, and like I said, agitating for a third world war, why is that not a red line for you as opposed to, say, RFK's stance on vaccines? This is a major difference because you said in your DMs to me, hold on one second, let me please
agree on Ukraine, so I don't get.
But we don't agree on the importance of Ukraine. We don't agree on how important that is, on what priority that ought to be in terms of establishing who we ought to endorse for the next president, right? Who has tremendous power
What do you mean endorse? I don't endorse politicians.
No, but what you're telling me, you have said that Marianne Williamson is your favorite of the candidates, right? Between her position
No,
on Ukraine.
I said if I had a gun to my head in the Democratic primary, yeah, I would vote for her over RFK or Biden.
Okay, fine. Over RFK, Biden. Fair enough. Well, her and Biden are pretty much the same on the Ukraine issue. But RFK is not. So let me ask you something. Why is it that her stance on Ukraine, if you disagree with it, why is that not a red line for you? It's a red line for me. Gun to my head, the Democratic Party.
I'm not like you. I'm not like most of these channels. I believe in something called nuance. I'm not an absolutist. I vote on more than one thing. Marianne Williamson supports Medicare for all. RFK Jr. doesn't. Marianne Williamson is talking about a new economic bill of rights. RFK Jr. says there's no bigger champion than a free market than I. RFK, since you're talking about war, went around standing and campaigning for Hillary Clinton 3 times. So I don't vote just on one thing. I'll be honest with you, in terms of my worldview, maybe we're just different.
All right, finish.
Maybe we're just different, which is fine. Everybody priorities different things. My main focus and my main priority is the stories I cover here, money out of politics, environmental genocide, the water poisoning in this country. It's not to say Ukraine is not important, but everybody prioritizes different things. Some people's top priority.
Okay, that's fair enough. There is nuance, and everybody has higher priorities on this issue and that issue, and that's fair enough. Reason to be against Robert Kennedy and Marianne Williamson is they're both inside the Democratic Party and not willing to do a dirty break. That's a good enough reason to be skeptical of them both. They both have some flaws. They both have some strengths. And Hillary campaigning for Hillary Clinton, endorsing Hillary Clinton, being pro Hillary Clinton is a strong reason to be against Robert Kennedy. On that one, I agree with you, Jordan. His opposition to Medicare for all is another reason to be skeptical of Robert Kennedy. On the Marianne Williamson side, her position on position on Ukraine is more interventionist and hawkish than I would care for it to be. So there are some issues where they're both going to be terrible on, and both of them are going to do the ultimate terrible thing, and that is endorse Biden. And this is just a dog and pony show. Now, they're both being screwed over right now with the Democratic establishment doing what they can to act like they're a non-entity. There is that. They're being screwed over. And the hell with Joe Biden and the corporate Democrats for doing this, and it's a slap in the face to the rank and file of the Democratic Party. At the same time, they're not exactly perfect either. Which, all the more reason why I'm going to get behind Cornel West, but that's beside the point there. But the point is that, Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy, there are things I like about them both. There are things that they have lacking as well.
Priority is the climate crisis. So others are Medicare for all. So when you're saying, why isn't it my red line? There's no track record of RFK actually being anti-war. He's talking, I like some of the things he's saying on Ukraine, but that doesn't mean I don't think if RFK was president, we wouldn't still be droning half the world. I don't think that means that we're going to, has he talked about, put a dollar number on cutting the military? I haven't heard that. So just because he's saying the things you like on Ukraine, no, it's not a red line that Marianne doesn't. I didn't agree with Bernie on all things. I think he should have been ran on reparations. This is what I have a problem with. It's this shit pushed by channels like yours that we have to cancel people. And this person's a sellout, not a real leftist.
That's really not what we're
crazy. You're saying, why isn't this a red line? Why isn't this a red line?
It seems like you're very selective in who you throw this at. You interviewed Marianne Williamson?
Yeah.
She's got a 30-year history reported out of abusing staff. Did you ask her about that? She's got a 30-year history of abusing staff? No, according to articles,
just like I don't
like the LA Times.
Right, just like I don't ask male politicians who are notorious for being verbally abusive and dickheads.
So you feel it's
to me, that's not.
So you believe 30 years of almost identical reporting on her.
I honestly have not read the article you're talking about. I read the Politico hit piece. I knew in 2020 there was complaints about her being verbally abusive, this and that. That's why, unlike what you said, I'm not endorsing her. I'm not telling people who to vote for.
But did you think it was a fair question to ask her? Because not one person.
No, I don't.
Touting her, and I'm not saying you're touting.
No, because I don't.
Crystal is, Kyle is. They have never asked her this question. You've never asked
about
her this
about her being
about a
verbally
30-year history. Not just verbally abusive. She is described as being violent, as being extremely emotionally unstable. Mike Nichols left her AIDS charity and started a separate one because of her behavior. I mean,
I'm genuinely open to what you're saying. I've just never seen any evidence or that she's been violent to anyone.
Well,
I do see evidence that
you're not going to see it. You don't work for her.
I do see evidence that she's a control freak. I do see evidence that she lashes out at staff. I've covered a lot of campaigns. Most of them do. Even Bernie, believe it or not.
This was reported about her before she was even a politician. 25 years before she was a politician.
What's the question? Why isn't that a red line for me, or why didn't I ask her about it?
Why hasn't anyone asked her about it, and why don't you talk about these people like Crystal and Kyle who just had her officiate at their wedding, never asking her about this in an interview? Is that not journalistic malfeasance?
To not ask her about reports that she has yelled at people?
No. These are not the reports. The reports are that back behind the scenes, she is extremely unstable, that she is emotionally unstable. Mike Nichols, the director, picked up and started a separate AIDS charity 30 years back to get away from her because of, according to them, abusive, emotionally unstable behavior. This is going back 30 years. This wasn't just a political...
Genuinely, Russell, like I'm being honest, if I read what you're talking about, I've read like 2 stories on Marianne Williamson. It was mostly anonymous staffers, and I've covered enough politics to know you take those with a grain of salt. I know the people I spoke with who told me the issues with her, but if I would have read that before and they're saying she's violent, this and that, I genuinely would have asked her about that. I don't know what story you're referring to. But to me, and we haven't even gotten to this because you guys have wanted to talk about the Jimmy stuff, but to me, the broader thing is another issue.
We haven't talked about the Jimmy stuff. It's been like 20 minutes.
Quite a lot of time on Ukraine.
About Ukraine. I want to talk about more about Ukraine.
But we agree on Ukraine. So
we don't agree on Ukraine. No, we don't agree on Ukraine. And I can tell we don't agree on Ukraine because you keep defining the Ukraine issue as one of simply Putin and Ukraine. A lot of people on the left with an international analysis, which was something sorely lacking from the Bernie movements, as I've come to realize since those Bernie movements, is that Ukraine, and these are the words of Fiona Hill, who just recently gave a big sort of red pill lecture on this. She's hardly a dissident voice in establishment foreign policy circles. The Ukraine war is a proxy between the West, NATO, the G7, and what she referred to in the speech as the rest of the world, the global South, the BRICS alliance that is emerging. It's a power struggle between Western hegemony, in other words, this fake concoction of capitalism and democracy, which really creates this sort of neoliberal fascism, and the rest of the world that sees an opportunity now to create an alternative economic model, governmental model, philosophical model to that the U.S. has tried to impose not only on the rest of the world, but on us here at home most of all, which is why, in my analysis of things, we will never fucking get Medicare for all as long as this empire functions as it does and asserts its will on the rest of the world, which is neoliberalism. That's
very true. And to put a finer point on it, when the British Empire started to become not an empire after World War II, and they started to grant independence to a lot of these colonies, they were able to afford things like a national health service. For the British people. I think if they would have held on to their empires all across the world, they wouldn't have been able to fund an NHS, for example. Because you hear this from Americans, Medicare for all, how can we pay for it? How can we pay for it? How can we pay for it? Well, we can pay for it if we are not involved everywhere else in the world. And the proof that we can pay for it is when we invaded Afghanistan and we invaded Iraq. When trying to rebuild those countries, the one thing we did correctly in that regard was we did create a Medicare for all system for the people of Afghanistan and a Medicare for all system for the people of Iraq. But apparently we can't have one for America. Our tax dollars funds universal health care systems in Israel, and it funds universal health care systems in Saudi Arabia, but we can't have universal health care here in the United States. I want y'all to know where I'm going with this. We can have universal health care if we're not the policemen of the world. The problem is we are the policemen of the world, and that is a big problem. I will put down the link of this video on the description box as soon as I sign off here. But that's basically the exchange they had, and they go on a little longer than that. But I just wanted to give y'all like a good meat and potatoes of it and give y'all my perspective on it. So, let's see. Choosey Heretics Choose Carnation Revolution Now says, Willie, bad cookies try to gaslight me in Harlan's media, and I flipped him hard. I'm hopeful that Status Coup is going to be a strong ally. Tina and Jordan have both been served processing info. Let's see here. Willie, there's good enough smart people of my own philosophy now that I feel like the table's flipping. It ain't the after party yet, and I feel it's getting close. All right. The deception and manipulation is over. It's just a matter of people acknowledging that peaceful, legal plan that's been in the wings all along. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Hey, Miguel, how are you doing? I'm back. Let's see here. I would refer to them as part of the bougie left. All the anti-JD people. JD standing for Jimmy Dore. Yep. Spinning says D Net Day. Let's see. Are you sure they're not paid to lie, funded to lie? Depends on who we're talking about. Wes is stuck to his principles mostly, but his policies and policies what I'm basing my support on. I'm going to base my support on policy, and he has the best policies of them all. Let's see. That's why they're the Bushi left. They will sell out at every opportunity. The Bushi lifestyle ain't cheap. Yep, that is true. That is true. So true. Let's see here. No, it was Obama's fault, not Clinton's. I think you're referring to Libya. She was the Secretary of State at the time. Obama is also a neocon. Notice that you did not name him, bro. Why? I will tell you why. Because I have said that Obama's a neocon. I'm not a fan of Barack Obama. I'm not a fan of Barack Obama. I voted for Ralph Nader in 2008. I was never all into this hope change and yes we can bullshit that he fed to us all. No, I'll tell you right now, Obama is a fucking neocon. I don't care about Barack Obama. Yeah, not at all. So anyway, if y'all like what you heard, please press like and comment. Comment anyway if you disagree with what I have to say. Feel free to share the contents on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we are, in fact, the muckrakers of our time. Always reject corporate media. Be sure to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit those buttons, and you'll be. That's what I ask. Also, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch. Follow me on all those channels. Even follow me on Rumble, which I'm trying to figure out. I'm still trying to figure that out. So follow me on all those platforms. And until next time, I am Willie Bragg. I will talk to you all later. Take care. Bye-bye.